Many, many years ago, in a small town in Montana, one deaf man worked in a mine. That deaf man had a way to wake himself up every morning before going to work. He made arrangements with a piece of rope and a pulley from the ceiling, and he tied it to a clock. And when the clock rung, the rope and a weight that was tied to the end of the rope would fall to the floor. The miner used an old flat iron and to the end of the rope, and every time that iron hit the floor, it made a big noise, and that was enough to wake the deaf miner up. Also, the noise woke up all the other miners in that small town, and it became a tradition to follow that noise for these people going to work. One day, the deaf miner got married, and both he and his wife went on their honeymoon. 3 days later, both of them came back, and they were surprised to see the town so quiet, because all the other miners were still asleep. They hadn't heard the noise from the iron hitting the floor.
The story that I'm about to tell you takes place in Texas. It's about a deaf couple who were in the market to buy a house. They went looking, and finally they found one they really liked. They took down the information that they needed, and then they had one of their mothers call to set up an appointment with the real estate agent. Upon meeting the man from the real estate agency, they also met another man inside, an older man. He looked very old, and he was acting very cranky, but all that he did was to show them inside the house, and then he disappeared. The couple was so impressed with the house. There were huge rooms, the kitchen, the dining room, the living room. They were all so spacious. It even had a beautiful fireplace. There was one rather odd thing, though, and that was the black cat at the top of the stairs, sitting as though it was glued in place. But even the upstairs was roomy. The bedrooms were large, and there was a long hallway. They really liked the house. They decided that they would discuss the buying terms. And finally, it was settled. They made a deal, and they purchased the house from the old man, who, by the way, had studied the couple very closely. Anyway, they moved in. They were excited to be in their beautiful new house, and the fact that neither the inside nor the outside needed much work made things even better. They bought the furniture that they needed little by little and settled themselves in quite comfortably. A few weeks later, while lying in bed, admiring the high ceilings and talking, they were interrupted. They were interrupted by gusty winds, and they felt the room shudder about them. The movements didn't seem to stop. They huddled close together, and then the movements did disappear. Nothing like this happened again for a few weeks, but then, all of a sudden, they were surrounded by these movements again. The black cat pounced onto the windowsill, and rain was coming down in torrents. The wind was blowing up a storm, a regular old Texas storm. They were scared, because these were the same vibrations that they had experienced just weeks before, and it wasn't right. Months passed before it happened again, but it did happen, and as scary as it was, they got out of bed and ran their hands across the wall. Sure enough, they could feel the vibrations in the wall. Around the corner, one of the corners, was a closet that they had never used, and now they found that there was a piece of tape across the keyhole of that closet door. That brought back the memory of the old man telling them that there was nothing in the closet and it wasn't worth using. So they decided not to bother with it, and they went back to bed. Well, the next time it happened, there was no doubt in their minds that the movements were coming from inside that closet. They ran to the closet, and they put their hands to the walls, and they felt the vibrations loud and strong. They decided that they would go ahead and open the door, feeling brave enough to see what was inside, when at that moment the black cat appeared out of nowhere and sat glaring at them. Well, that was enough to make them change their minds and not fiddle with the closet. The next morning one of their mothers came over, and she put her ear to the wall, but she heard nothing, so they agreed that the next time it happened she would come back. She thought they were letting their imaginations run away with them anyway. Well, without fail, there was another storm, and the vibrations were felt again, and this time the mother came over immediately. She heard a strange knocking sound coming from inside the mysterious closet, so they ran and they got hammers and a crowbar and pounded and pried and broke the door open. And to their horror, they found a skeleton strung up, bones rattling against the wall.
Some years ago, a group of teachers at a school for the deaf were sitting in a room waiting for a teachers' meeting to begin. There were several hearing teachers sitting together, and they were conversing. And in another corner, there was a deaf teacher sitting down, and later he got up and he walked over to the hearing teachers, and he asked them what they were talking about. One teacher signed to him and said, "We're talking about the Lindbergh kidnapping trial. What do you think about that?" And the deaf teacher wondered, and he asked them to excuse him, and he went over and he sat in his corner. But later he got up and he walked over again to the hearing teacher and he said, "I've been thinking a lot about this, and I don't really think that there was more than one man involved in this." The hearing teacher laughed and he laughed about that, and the deaf teacher became very embarrassed, and he asked, "Well, what's wrong?" The one teacher signed to him and he said, "We're talking about the Dion quintuplets." Oh. One night some years ago, there were two piano players playing in a hotel here in Washington. When they finished playing a song called Midnight Sonata, an old woman came up and gave them a compliment, saying that those two men played very wonderful music. "I'd like to know who wrote that." Well, one of the players responded and said that Beethoven wrote that many, many years ago. And he added, saying that, it's really wonderful that Beethoven wrote many, many different compositions, even though he was deaf himself. The old woman said, "What? Death? I'm sorry." And she went away. 2 or 3 days later, the two players received a package with a letter. Well, they opened the package and they found a hearing aid. They read the letter. It was written by that same woman. She said in the letter, "Please give this aid to the poor Mr. Beethoven." Now, I'd like to tell you a true story based on my experiences as a rehabilitation counselor. One day, a young man came to see me. His name was Bill. He sat there, we looked each other over, and really, I felt sorry for the guy. His face looked so bad. He had bumps all over. It was real bad. There were red and yellow pimples and blemishes. It was very, very bad. The young man felt good. I asked him and he said, "No, I felt sick." So I interviewed him. I said, "First, I need to find out what you want." He says, "Well, I'd like a job and training." So I explained to him that vocational rehabilitation requires certain things before we can help. And the boy understood. I told him I'd send him to a doctor. The doctor would give him a physical examination to see if he was okay, his eyes, ears, nose, and throat, and to see if he's deaf or not. If he's deaf, then I can help him. And he said, okay. And so the boy went on to the doctor and he had the examination. 2 weeks later, he came back again. I had received the doctor's report and had looked it over. It was pretty bad. This young man had sugar diabetes. Very bad. It would require insulin. Well, I explained to Bill that you must learn how to give yourself shots. Bill says, "Really? Me? Give myself shots?" I said, "Sure. No problem. You can learn how to give yourself shots." I said, "Oh, I'd never given myself a shot. Long hypodermic? No, I'm afraid." I said, "Well, the doctor explained to you that you were sick." He said, "Yes, but I didn't understand. You know, he was talking. I couldn't read his lips. He wrote to me, and I couldn't understand what he wrote." So I brought the doctor's report, and I looked at it, and I explained it to him. Sugar diabetes. It's very bad. If you eat candy, you'll become more sick, and you may go into shock and die. The boy looked at me. Die? Not me. I eat candy all the time, and I haven't died. I said, hold it. Maybe not now, but later. If you eat too much sugar, it'll strike you. You'll pass out, and people won't know what's wrong, and they may leave you there, and you'll die. He looked at me and he said, "Really?" I said, "Sure." Oh, but Bill said, "No, I'm so tempted. I like candy." I says, "You have to choose either your health or death. To prevent the death, you must take the shots. The doctor will show you how you can administer the medicine yourself. Measure it out and give yourself the shot." "Oh, but I'm so afraid," he said. Well, it's your choice. I will help you, but you must cooperate. The boy thought it over, what to do. He said, I'll go get a syringe for you, and we'll get the medicine for you, and we'll give it to you, and we'll help show you how to use everything and help you on your diet. You must do it, okay? He was so worried about the shot. He was real resistant to it. I said, look, you must do it. I said, I can't help you if you don't cooperate. Rehabilitation means help. If you die, I can't help you. I can't send you to school. I can't get you training for a job if you don't cooperate with me. But if you take the shots regularly and you become healthy, your face, all the blemishes, all over your face, you look in the mirror every morning and you see those pimples, and it's from the diabetes and too much sugar. Wouldn't you like a nice face? With a nice face, you'd look good, and the girls would look you over and they'd like you. Right now, do girls look at you? They see your face, it's so ugly, and they resist you. Am I right? He said, yes. I said, okay. Later, we'll buy you a syringe, and we'll buy the medicine, and we'll have the doctor come and give you an explanation on how to use it. Will you do it? Okay, I will. So he left. 1 week, 2 weeks, I was waiting. I didn't see the boy again, and I was wondering. So I looked for him, and I found him in his apartment. He was laid out, sick. I said, have you been taking your shots? He says, no, I'm afraid. I said, Now, I'm a counselor, and I have to help that individual. How? I mean, he's so stubborn and afraid. Well, I explained to him, okay, if you're afraid and you won't take the shot yourself, then you'll have to go to the doctor regularly, every morning at the same time. Go to the doctor, and he'll give you the shots. Oh, but I don't have the time, he said. I said, well, time? You could take the shot yourself and easily and go on to work. Or would you like to go to the doctor every day and waste your time? He said, no. I said, well, now, I want to help you, and I'll show you how to boil the needles in hot water, and to measure the medicine into the syringe, and to give yourself a shot. I'll show you how, and I'll let you try it for the first time. You know what happened? He put the needle to his arm and he fainted. Flat out. I stood there and looked. I waited and waited. Later, he got up, all flushed. He laid down. I said, do you feel better? Now you're stubborn. Now I want to show you how to do it yourself. Still, he wouldn't do it. Well, then I agreed that there was a wastebasket over there, and I saw candy wrappers in the wastebasket. The boy loved candy. I told him, you have to stop eating candy. It will help you. Oh, but I like it. I'm so tempted. Okay, after we were finished, I says, okay, I've got to leave now. Later, I want you to see me. Come to my office, and we'll discuss more, and I'll explain to you some other things. He said, okay. I says, now, don't be eating any candy. It'll make you sick, and it'll break your face out. Come and see me. So the next day, he was to come see me. Before he came to see me, I was preparing a little bit of a surprise for the boy. That morning, I went to a mortuary, a funeral home, And I asked the funeral director if I could borrow his book showing various pictures of coffins. He wanted me to explain why, and I explained, and so he said, okay, and he loaned me the book. And Bill came to my office. I said, Bill, I have something for you. Bill said, what? I said, wait, I'll show you. I opened the book up, and I said, these are coffins, and I'd like you to choose the one pretty one that you'd like yourself, something we can bury you in. Bill became real frightened. No, no. I said, yes, Bill, pick which one you want. Not many people have an opportunity to pick their own coffins. Now, you have a rare chance to look at all these different coffins, and it's wonderful, before you die. Bill said, no, 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 no. His face turned white. I said, why are you afraid? Maybe you'd like something that's real soft, white satin maybe. Maybe you'd like red or pink or blue, something that'd be comfortable for you. You can choose it before you die. No, no, no. Yeah. He pushed the book away and he closed the book. He said, I don't want that, I don't want that. And I said, Bill, you're going to die soon because you have bad diabetes. I'm trying to help you. If you want to go on eating candy, suit yourself and die. You can pick your coffin now. Bill went, no, no. He wasn't actually saying anything, but you could see, no, no. So I moved the book out of the way. Bill was sitting there with his eyes shut. He was in shock. Later, finally, he looked at me. You say, you really mean it? I said, yeah, I mean it. You're not teasing me? I said, no. He nodded his head, no candy. I said, no candy. Shots, I have to. I said, yes, you must give yourself shots. Okay. So, I helped Bill. From that time on, several years had passed. And one day, Bill came to see me again. His face was clean. All the bumps were gone. Bill, you're looking pretty good. How are you? He said, oh, really? I have a girlfriend now. A girlfriend? You mean you're going to get married someday? He said, yes, yes. Oh, I said, that's wonderful. Bill, are you eating any candy still? He said, no. And that is the end of my story. To share my experience with others is not always good, so I'll try to tell you a story about my life. Many years ago, I was going out looking for a job. I happened to meet one man at a large college called American University, and I had an interview. So he said, well, that he would consider about hiring me and would be in touch with me later. I said thank you, and I left. Several days later, I received a telephone call asking me to go back to that same place. I went in the morning. It was early, and I met him, and he said he had made up his mind and he wanted to give me that job. I was very happy to becoming a postal clerk. On my first few months, I started to meet different hearing people and taught them deaf sign language. At the same time, they were giving me their post office experience, and I was learning and learning. I was real enthusiastic, and I made many friends in that large place. The post office at American University had almost 14,000 students, and we had to serve them at that post office. It was not any problem for me to learn the post office system, but communication problems were there at the beginning, and later on, almost all of them became skilled in sign language. So, on my 4th year, my big boss was promoted to another position. So, it was necessary for them to choose someone to take over the postmaster job. So, I happened to be in a very good position for that job because I did everything that my boss asked me. I was enthusiastic and so on, and there was no comparison with the other workers, so I just happened to be deaf. Before the decision was made and the announcement was made, he asked me to go for a private meeting in his office, and we talked. He said, "Is deafness going to be a problem?" I said, "No. There are many other deaf people in the United States who have high-level jobs, and you have give me a trial. And don't worry about the skill of my work, worry about the people out there." And at last they decided to accept me and give me that position, and I went into the post office, and we were going to make the announcement. All the postal workers gathered around, and in that group, the big boss announced that Hubert will be your new postmaster. Right after he finished the announcement, a few of the men standing there said, "But he's deaf. He can't hear." I was really surprised that they would insult me about my deafness and think that a deaf person couldn't handle it. Up to that time, we and the others had been good friends, and I had taught them sign language and so on, and we shared a lot of work together. And on that one day when they chose me to become the postmaster, several of them were really disgusted. They felt that a deaf person couldn't handle the job. They said, "No way," and they were talking negatively. But the boss said that it was his decision, he had made it, and he left me with that big group meeting, about 60 workers. So on my first day, I tried my best to make them understand that I would be flexible and so on, but as work went on and days passed, it was necessary for me to fire 11 of my workers in my first year because a few of them just refused to accept me as a deaf person. So I stayed as the postmaster at American University for 5 full years and was very successful. It was very interesting. There were those 11 that I fired. Later on, I had occasion to meet them in town, and I just found that they had never really grown up. Very often, when deaf people take positions or become a boss, many of the hearing people are not used to a deaf person, and they have their pride, or they're not really sure they understand if a deaf person can prove themselves. And it wouldn't be any problem, because during my 5 years as the postmaster, I did a very good job. It was impressive, and later on, they started to notice that a deaf person could do a good job. It was no difference. There was only one thing, the communication problem. I was more lucky because I could talk pretty well, even though I couldn't hear. One very interesting thing happened to me during the time I was having problems with some of them. They wouldn't give me phone messages, and that's the one problem. Later, I started to get those people, those troublemakers, and those were the ones that were let go. Then another day, a deaf man from Gallaudet College named Ronald Griff came to American University to see my post office and was very surprised to see that a deaf person was in charge of such a large post office with all those hearing people working under him. So I showed him around my post office, and he was surprised, and he asked me if I was interested in transferring to Gallaudet. Yeah, I said, well, I might, I've been working here for 5 years as postmaster and had had no other promotions, so it would be nice to have a transfer. So I went back to Gallaudet College, and I was trying to work out a way for me to transfer. At last, Gallaudet sent me a letter, and I went over to Gallaudet, and I remember very well that on the day of the interview, the committee was comprised of 15 people, and they all asked me questions, many questions. Most of them were very easy for me to respond to because of that big post office, and here Gallaudet was very small. They were asking me little baby questions, but I enjoyed that interview. The next day, I got a letter saying that they had hired me, so I transferred to Gallaudet College and working at Gallaudet College post office. They have a very small post office with about 1,500 students, while American University had more than 14,000 students. So transferring to that job was really enjoyable, much more than having all the headaches of a big post office. So I want you deaf people to know that if you try to do something, you can be successful. Don't think, your hearing problem is a negative thing, but think of yourself and make some effort. And I think you can be very successful if you try to be successful.